Hello Primary 4 students. This video is done for you as revision on Lesson 2, the human respiratory system. To understand the meaning of the respiration process, we have to answer this question. Why do you think we eat food? Of course, all of us know that we eat food in order to get energy. We need that energy in all our daily activities. Walking, running, playing, even talking. You need energy all the time. How can we get that energy? The energy is produced inside your body cells. Knew from lesson 1 that when you eat food, it passes through your digestive system and it's completely digested in the small intestine. When it's fully digested, the blood absorbs this digested food from the small intestine and carries it to all your body cells. Okay, so now your cells contain food. Can the cell produce the energy now? No, not yet, because something is missing inside the cells. That's the oxygen. The cell must contain both food and oxygen in order to produce the energy. Okay, so the food or the digested food comes from the digestive system. From where does the oxygen come? It comes from another system, which is today's lesson. This is the respiratory system. So now, after the blood carries the food from the digestive system and transport it to all your cells, and also the blood carries the oxygen from the respiratory system and transport it to the body cells, now the cell is ready to produce the energy. And this happens through a process known as the respiration process. So what is the respiration process? It is a process where the food changes into energy in presence of oxygen. The oxygen must be present. Again, what is the respiration process? It is the changing or the burning of food in presence of oxygen to produce the energy. So now we understand that all the systems are working together. The digestive system supplies our body cells with the digested food. The respiratory system supplies our body cells with the oxygen, while the circulatory system or the blood that you are going to study next year in details carries both food and oxygen and transport them to all your body cells to produce the energy needed. So again, the cells needs food and oxygen to change or burn that food into energy. But there are other materials produced with the energy. These materials are waste materials. Some of these waste materials are gases, like carbon dioxide gas and water vapor. And since they are waste materials, they are not needed by the body has to get rid of them. So again, the blood's going to carry those gases, which are wastes, and carries them back to the respiratory system to breathe them out, to get rid of them. Okay, now let's talk about the respiratory system. We knew from lesson 1 that each system in your body is formed of a group of organs. What are the organs of the respiratory system? The respiratory system starts with the nose. You remember the first organ in the digestive system? It was the mouth. Okay, after the nose comes the pharynx. Pharynx. Do you remember the word pharynx? Yes, it was also present in the digestive system. So the pharynx, it's a common organ which is present in both digestive system and respiratory system. After the pharynx, the larynx. Larynx, or sometimes called the voice box. Then comes a tube known as trachea. Trachea. At the end of the trachea, it is divided into two branches known as bronchi. Bronchi. Bronchi is a plural word. Each one of them is known as bronchus. Bronchus. Each bronchus enters a lung. How many lungs do we have? We have two lungs, right lung and left lung. So, each bronchus is divided into smaller branches inside the lungs known as bronchioles. Bronchioles. And at the end of each bronchiole, there are very tiny or small sacs known as alveoli. Look at the alveoli. They have a balloon. They are balloon-like structures or tiny sacs filled with air, and they are known as alveoli or air sacs. The last part in the respiratory system, it's a muscle and it's known as diaphragm. Diaphragm. We are going to talk about each organ in the respiratory system in details. But let me ask you first, where do you think your respiratory system exists in your body? We knew from lesson 1 that there was a cavity known as the abdominal cavity where most of the digestive organs lie. There is another cavity which is present above the abdominal cavity. This cavity is known as chest cavity or thoracic cavity, and this is where the respiratory system lies. So we have two cavities now, the chest cavity or thoracic cavity at the top, and this is where the respiratory system exists, and beneath the chest cavity, the abdominal cavity, and this is where most of the digestive system exists. Okay? Now, let's talk about the respiratory system. Your respiratory system or your lungs are surrounded by bones. These bones are called ribs. These are the ribs. They are bones, strong bones. Why are the two lungs surrounded by bones? To protect them, because the lungs are soft organs. They are very delicate. They are protected by those bones called ribs. They form a structure as this one in the picture. This is known as a rib cage because it looks like a cage, and from inside there are the two lungs protected. Now let's talk about each organ in the digestive system in details. Let's start with the nose. You can breathe through both your nose and your mouth, but it's better to breathe through your nose. Why? Because your nose contains three things: hairs, mucus layer, and blood capillaries. What's the importance of the hairs and the mucus layer inside your nose? They filter the air from dust and microbes, because the air entering your nose is not completely clean. It has to be filtered out of any dust particles or microbes before entering the lungs to protect your lungs from any diseases or infections by those microbes. The mucus layer is a sticky membrane where any dust particles or microbes can stick to it and prevent it from reaching your lungs. Okay, what about the blood capillaries? Blood capillaries are very thin vessels or pipelines where blood flows. Since the blood that flows in your blood capillaries is warm, when the air passes by those blood capillaries, it becomes warm. So the importance of the blood capillaries inside your nose is to warm the air before entering the lungs, so it will not cause any painful sensation if the air was cold. So a very important question here. Give reason why it's better to breathe through the nose and not through the mouth. The answer is because the nose contains hair and mucus. They filter the air from any dust or microbes, and it also contains the blood capillaries to warm the air before entering the lungs. Okay? Now, do you remember the organ that comes after the nose? Yes, it's the pharynx. It is the pharynx. The pharynx is a common cavity that is present in both systems, the digestive system and the respiratory system. This means that if you are eating food, the food passes through your pharynx and then down through the esophagus. And if you are breathing air, the air passes from your nose to your pharynx and then down to the trachea. So the pharynx is a common cavity between esophagus and trachea. It leads to both esophagus and to trachea. If you are eating food, the food will pass through the esophagus. And if you are breathing air, the air will pass through the trachea after they pass through the pharynx. Okay, so look at this picture. The pharynx here, it's a cavity that leads to two tubes. The esophagus, here, can you see the food passing down the esophagus? And next to it, the trachea. The trachea, here at the front, this is the pathway of the air, where the air passes. Again, the pharynx, it's a common cavity that leads to both the trachea and the esophagus. Okay? So, as you can see from this picture, the pharynx leads to the trachea and the esophagus. The question is, why when we eat food, the food passes through the esophagus and it will not fall down through the trachea? Do you know what will happen if the food gets through the trachea? You will suffocate. The pathway of the air will be blocked. You cannot breathe. So the food has to pass through the other way, the esophagus. So what prevents the food from going in here through the trachea? The answer is the presence of a gate known as the epiglottis. A gate known as the epiglottis. This epiglottis is normally opened, but when you are swallowing food, it's going to close the opening of the trachea to prevent the food from going in here. So the only pathway that's open now is the esophagus. So the epiglottis is present here at the top of the trachea to close the opening of the trachea once you are swallowing food, in order to prevent any food from passing down here. Okay, so the food will pass through the correct pathway, which is the esophagus. That's why you have to swallow the food slowly, because if you are eating fast or swallowing the food fast, you are not giving enough time for the epiglottis to close, and this may cause you to cough very hard. This is because maybe some food particles entered inside the trachea, so you are coughing, trying to get this food out of the trachea. Okay, now look at this picture. Can you see this is the epiglottis? It's normally opened, but when the food is being swallowed, it moves down to close the opening of the trachea at the front. So the food will have only one way available, opened, which is the esophagus. Okay? Now, let's talk about the structure of the trachea. The trachea has the larynx from the top, and as we said, the larynx is known as the voice box because this is where the sound is produced through some vibrations of your vocal cords. So the larynx is called the voice box. It's the place where your voice or your sound is produced. Okay? Now, the trachea or this windpipe is surrounded from outside with the rings, cartilaginous strings. The cartilage is a structure that's softer than the bones. It's hard enough to keep the trachea tube opened all the time. So give reason why this trachea is surrounded by those strings, by those cartilaginous strings. Why? to keep the trachea open all the time. Permanently means all the time. We need the trachea to be opened all the time because this is the pathway of the air to be able to breathe. The trachea is going to close by the epiglottis only during swallowing, but otherwise the trachea is opened. The cartilaginous strings keep them opened to keep breathing all the time, even when you are sleeping. And at the end of the trachea, these are the two branches we have talked about, which are the two bronchi. Okay? Now, again, the trachea is surrounded from the outside with incomplete cartilaginous strings to guarantee the opening of the trachea all the time for breathing. What about the trachea from the inside? If we looked at the trachea from inside, you will see that it's lined with the hairy structure, something that looks like hairs, known as cilia. Cilia. The function of those cilia is to eject up or to remove any strange objects before entering the lungs, like dust, for example. Can you see? The dust particles are trapped inside those cilia, so they are prevented from reaching the lungs. Okay? Now, let's get inside the lungs and see the alveoli. The alveoli, or the air sacs, as you can see in these pictures, are surrounded with many blood vessels or many blood capillaries. What are the importance of those blood capillaries? The blood capillaries are very important for the gas exchange. Gas exchange. What's the meaning of the gas exchange? Do you remember when we said that the blood carries the oxygen from the lungs and then to the body cells to undergo the respiration process and produce the energy? So these blood capillaries contains blood inside. Blood is flowing or moving inside the blood capillaries. Those blood capillaries with blood inside surrounding the alveoli, it absorbs or takes the oxygen from those alveoli or those air sacs. Why? Why the blood takes this oxygen from the air sacs? To transport this oxygen to all the body cells, because all the body cells needs the oxygen, right? Beside the food to produce the energy. Okay? And also we said that the waste gases like the carbon dioxide produced during the respiration process has to be carried away from the cells and move outside the body. The blood also takes this carbon dioxide from the cells because it's a waste material and then throw it or carry it to the alveoli. Okay? Why? Because it's going to be expelled outside your lungs and out of your body. This is known as the gas exchange. The blood takes something from the alveoli, something useful, something important, which is the oxygen, and transport it to the body cells. And instead, it's going to leave or through the carbon dioxide inside this alveoli, so they are going to go outside the body. The blood takes the carbon dioxide from the cells, the waste materials from the cells, and transport it to the alveoli. So the gas exchange happens between what and what? Between the blood inside the blood capillaries and between the air in the air sacs or the alveoli. Again, the blood takes the oxygen from the alveoli to carry it to all the body cells. And the blood also leaves or puts the carbon dioxide waste inside the alveoli to get rid of it. Okay? The blood took this carbon dioxide from the cells. It was a waste product produced during the respiration process. One more time, what is the gas exchange? The blood takes the oxygen from your air sacs to transport it to all your body cells to undergo the respiration process. And after the waste products are produced, like the carbon dioxide gas, the blood is going to take this waste or this carbon dioxide gas back to the lungs or the alveoli inside the lungs to get rid of it. Okay, this is known as the gas exchange. So where does the gas exchange happen inside your lungs? Inside the alveoli. Okay, and this is why the blood capillaries have very thin walls to allow these materials, the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, to pass easily throughout the walls of the air sacs and the walls of the blood capillaries for the exchange to be easily done. So we understand now from this that the respiration process occurs in two stages or two processes. The process where we breathe in and another process where we breathe out. The first process where we breathe in is called inhalation process. Inhalation process. While the other process where we breathe out is called the exhalation process. Exhalation process. What is the difference between the inhalation and the exhalation process? The inhalation process means the process where the air rich in oxygen enters the lungs, while the exhalation process, it is the process where the air rich in carbon dioxide moves outside the lungs. Now I want you to notice the changes that happening to your lungs and your diaphragm during both the inhalation and the exhalation process. There are three things that happen or three changes that happens during inhalation and exhalation process. The size of the lungs change, the movement of the ribs, do you remember the ribs surrounding the lungs? And the movement of the diaphragm muscles. Let's see what happens during the inhalation process. During the inhalation process, we are breathing in air. So the diaphragm is going to move down or contracts. Contracts means move down. It moves down to give a larger space for the lungs to expand or increase in size. So the volume of the lungs increases, like the one in the picture. The movement of the diaphragm is opposite to the movement of the ribs. If the diaphragm moves down or contracts, the ribs are going to move up. Okay, so during the inhalation process, the diaphragm moves down, the ribs moves up. The volume of the lungs increases or gets bigger. While during the exhalation process, the opposite occurs. Now the diaphragm is going to relax or moves up. Okay, the movement of the ribs is opposite to the movement of the diaphragm. Since the diaphragm moves up, the ribs are going to move down. Observe the volume of the lungs. The volume gets smaller. The volume of the lungs gets smaller again or decreases. Okay, so now during the exhalation process, the diaphragm, as we said, moves up and the lungs get smaller inside. I want you to notice the movement of both the diaphragm and the size of the lungs. During the inhalation, the diaphragm moves down. Notice now the diaphragm moves down, the lungs getting bigger in size. While during the exhalation, the diaphragm moves up and the lungs gets smaller in size. Okay? Now, so during the inhalation process, what is the type of gas that reaches your lungs? Oxygen. And what are the types of gases that is present during the exhalation? What are the exhaled gases? They are carbon dioxide and water vapor. We are going to make an experiment to prove that the exhaled air, the air that you breathe out, contains carbon dioxide gas. Okay? Here is an experiment to detect or to test for the presence of carbon dioxide during the exhalation process. We test for the presence of carbon dioxide by something called the lime water. The lime water has a transparent, or it's clear as in the figure, and this clear lime water is going to change its color into white only in presence of carbon dioxide. Okay, so the experiment is to bring this lime water and blow some air. When you blow air, you are breathing out air. Blow inside this tube containing lime water for some minutes. You will notice that the lime water changes from clear into turbid. Turbid means milky or with white color. Okay, this proves that there was carbon dioxide in the exhaled air, because the lime water will change into this milky color only in presence of carbon dioxide. So we conclude from the experiment that the exhaled air, the air you breathe out, contains carbon dioxide gas. And we also learn that the lime water turns into milky only in presence of carbon dioxide. Okay, can we test for the presence of water vapor gas during the exhalation? Yes, this is very simply done by blowing through a piece of glass or mirror. Okay, if you blow through a mirror, you will notice the formation of small drops of water. This is the water vapor comes out. It's warm, and when it touches a cold surface like a mirror, it's going to condense. Do you remember the condensation process? The change from gas into liquid? Yes, the water vapor, it's a gas and it's warm. When it touches the surface of the mirror, which is a cold surface, it changes into water drops. Okay? Now, at the end of the lesson, there are some precautions or some instructions that we have to follow in order to keep the respiratory system healthy and keep your lungs in a good health. You have to avoid the crowded places, because especially of those crowded places were poorly ventilated. Poorly ventilated means they do not contain enough amount of air and oxygen. Okay, number 2, avoid the smoking areas and do not stay beside smokers, because you are breathing the harmful gases that's coming out from the burned cigarettes. Number 3, avoid exposure to severe cold. Stay warm, put on heavy clothes if the weather is cold to protect you from getting a flu. This may cause diseases or harms to your lungs. And finally, eat healthy food, especially that type of food that contains vitamin C. The vitamin C is very good for your respiratory system, like oranges, guava, and other fruits. Now we have reached the end of the lesson. I hope that you understood it well. Please, I want you to replay the video again and write down the points you need to discuss with your teacher. And we are going to send a worksheet as homework. Please try to answer the assessment or the worksheet, and send any points that you do not understand, and we are going to send a model answers for you later. Thank you, Primary 4.